Hey, I'm Christopher Schroeder. I'm co-founder of Next Billion Ventures and an advisor to Village Global in Silicon Valley. And I'm a long friend to STEP and supporting the tech entrepreneurs in the Middle East for a decade to the date. My journey began at the first gathering of startups in the region, Celebration of Entrepreneurship, literally 10 years ago this month, which led me to write this bestseller, Startup Rising, the entrepreneurial revolution remaking the Middle East. Today in my fund, but also on the investment committees of WAMDA Capital and Saudi Telecom Ventures, I couldn't be more enthusiastic about all the things you guys are building right now. But I'm particularly enthusiastic about the next half hour, as few have been front and center of the most dramatic shifts today in the region than our guest. Her Royal Highness Princess Rima is Ambassador of the United States, of course, the first woman in the country's history to serve in this role. I think it's appropriate in that few today have been as committed to women and empowerment as she. In the private sector, she's been a storied entrepreneur and executive, just like you all. She co-founded Ubreen, a women's gym, and is CEO of Alpha International, which represents some of the most renowned luxury retail brands. There, in partnership with female recruitment agency Glowwork, she commissioned a study, Obstacles for Women in the Workplace, which led to the first workplace child nursery. Her public service career began as vice president of women's affairs at Saudi General Sports Authority, where she developed policies and programs that benefited women and children throughout Saudi Arabia. She quickly rose as deputy of development and planning and president of Mass Participation Federation, making her yet again first woman to lead a multi-sports federation in the kingdom. Her boards in recognition for her leadership in women in the workforce are legion. Appropriately, this is her second time in Washington, D.C., as her father also served as ambassador here. So perhaps it's not too late a year in to still say, welcome back. So it's so nice to be with you today.
No, it's great to be with you, Chris. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
You know, it's a historic moment for women in the region. And you have said something that really has stuck with me. You wrote, never has there been a more promising and optimistic time to be a young woman in Saudi Arabia than right now. That the future is in fact going to be defined by Arab women rather than for them. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
You know, I think historically, not just in the Middle East, everywhere, decisions always start from a very male-centric point of view, simply because many times leadership decision makers are male. So they think they're doing what's in our benefit, our being women. And that's great. It's wonderful, but it only takes us so far. Once you have a woman in the decision-making process, the aperture widens, the attention widens to specific details that actually make life, I would say, better, improve the quality of life of individuals, and not to be stereotypical and say, you know, women bring empathy, but we do think differently. Our brains are structured different, and I think that's why we were created equal, but different, male and female, and we both bring a lot of value to the table. And so I just think in previous decision making, we lost out on a lot of good by not involving women. But today that's changing. The kingdom, through Vision 2030, and in the past, we'd recognize the value of women. The question was, how do we bring them in? What do we do here? And the reality is today, women are everywhere. We're decision makers, we're participants, we're team members, and that's critical. And I think that's why you see the vision and everything that's come out of it is so rich, it's robust, it's exciting, because it has that balance of energy, the balance of the male and female energy. And I think that's wonderful.
Are there a couple of, I mean, just off the top of your head, because I know there are 1,000, but are there a couple of examples of just kind of women from Saudi in the region that just sort of jump out at you as a kind of a case in point of what you just described?
Yes. I see the women that work in tech, Dima Yahya. She jumped from working with Microsoft and all others to leading a digital transformation in the kingdom. I look at Lubna Ulayan, who started as one of the very first women in business. And every woman who has come into the world of business looks at her, learns from her example, is able to compare herself and say, how do we go from here? But the reality is, Lubna came from a family that empowered her. Lubna came from a family that embraced her and wanted her success. And that's not a true statement for other people. So she can't be the exclusive example. I look at the women who've created products. I look at the women who've been creating fashion, I would say. Sports are the women I adore because I witnessed their journey literally from scratch, where Adwa Al-Arifi created one of the first women's soccer teams and did everything, you know, clandestine and behind closed doors. And today she's leading investments for the Ministry of Sports. Today she sits on the board of the Football Federation. I think of the girls who started with me in my office when we worked from my home to try to deliver deliver women's sports. They're now on the boards of sports organizations. They're commentators. They're participants. And it's just exciting. It's exciting, Chris, because for every example I could cite for you, there's 500 others I haven't even met yet that I've read about, I've seen on Instagram, and it's a good world for them. The question is, what can we do to give them as equal a foundation and platform that young men have had? How can we give them the same network that allows them to have, someone to catch them or someone to help guide them that the young men have had? And so it's the entrance of women across the board. People need to make room. That can be uncomfortable, but it's not just about making room, it's giving them equal support.
I remember one of the first times I met you, you were doing amazing work for young girls in PE, physical education programs around Saudi. And you said something that really stuck with me. You said sports is a human right. What do you
Yeah.
mean by that?
So I'm glad you asked that question because it's something that I've been debating a lot with different organizations that I'm involved with in sports, whether it's the International Olympic Committee, or I just participated in an event called United Through Sports, and that was the very question. What does it mean? Is sports a human right? So I would say, do we consider education a human right? Physical health, mental health, emotional well-being, freedom from isolation, freedom from poverty, and social integration. If we think all of those are basic human rights, there is a tool that can allow us to integrate all of those things, and it's sports, whether it's individual sports or whether it's group sports. I witnessed the development and change in my children when they walked across that soccer field or when they got on the tennis court, whatever it was they were doing. And again, single sport or group sport, it helps. There's a level of maturity, there's strategic planning, there's engagement, there's preparation, there's win, there's loss. There's just a lot of development that happens there. And I think when I noticed the difference, once we started including physical education in schools and the opportunities that created, I believe it is a human right. I believe we have to have access on our playing fields. We have to have access on the side of the road, on the pavements where people are jogging and running and riding bikes. We need to have that available everywhere. I think it creates a healthier, more balanced society. I don't think it's a luxury. The luxury is, should we play tennis, squash, or lacrosse? That's a luxury. The necessity is, should we have physical education and should sports be available to all? Yes.
And there's a multiplier effect, right? I mean, the more women who do it, the more women who do it. I mean, how to think about that?
Absolutely, I agree. The first, when we were creating events and activities for women in sports, many of them were afraid to be public about it. And we had to come out and say, by the way, regulation has changed, you can do this. And so I would make sure either I'm there or one of my team members would be there to kind of hold people's hand and say, this is going to be okay. And to your point, as soon as someone would see a young lady jogging down the road, she'd go get her sneakers and tomorrow she was out there. As soon as they'd see someone riding a bicycle with her husband or with her children, next day, women were out there. It really took us only about 2 months to change the mindset of, do I actually belong there? And the answer is yes, you do, and not you by yourself. You and your community, you and your family, you and your friends, you belong. And that concept of you belong is why I think there is no more exciting time to be alive in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as a woman than today. Because in every angle of every corner of every industry, every institution, we belong and there's room for us.
I remember that fantastic ad a few years, maybe 2 years ago or less, the Nike ad, which just captured almost beautifully visually what you just said, which was these women just kind of one young girl and one young woman athlete after another. Do you feel like the message is getting out clearly? Do you feel that there's enough that's being done not only in Saudi but across the region?
I think the message is coming out. I think the resources are still lacking. But I think that's a true statement across the board. Resources are lacking for women's equal participation in so many different sectors because it's not enough to just open the door and welcome us in. We need, and when you were talking earlier about the research on the obstacles for women entering the workplace, a resource for women entering the workplace in retail in 2012, 2013 was daycare. A resource for women entering the workplace today is still daycare. It's the obstacle, it's the resource. She needs it in order to come in and join equally and fully. For us in Saudi years ago, it was driving. That's been resolved. But the issues that women face in Saudi are the same as everywhere else. I talk to women all across the United States of America. Daycare still comes up. Universal daycare. Is that a right? Should that be mandated across the board? I think so. I think so because it not only allows the woman into the workplace, it relieves the stress financially on the couple. It relieves the stress for the child, not knowing senses of stability. So it's when you begin to bring women into the workplace and when you begin to engage with women, you recognize her impact on a social fabric. And it's not to say the men are not a part of that social fabric, but men historically have been able to come and go as a singular unit, whereas women, when we come and go, we bring everything with us. We bring what we were doing this morning, what we're planning for the weekend, managing the skills. And I think that's why people say women multitask. It's by force. Whether it was by nature or not before, it is today by force. We're managing the household. We are essentially the COO of life.
I mean, you are, I mean, you in fact almost define what it means to be a startup entrepreneur in that kind of multitasking and many challenges and a sense of priority. Obviously, it's easy to become excited by the speed and significance of the change. Challenges exist. I wonder, what do you think are the most formidable challenges? And you're talking to amazing women and men right now who get up in the morning, go to bed at night, thinking about how to fix challenges. I wonder what guidance you might give them based on what you're seeing.
So COVID is what highlighted it for me most extremely, and it's the digital divide. I think previously where I was concerned, because I do enjoy uh, the world I enjoy operating in is the world of social impact. So I like to look at things and say, okay, I see here's a problem. What could we collectively do to fix this? Um, and I had previously started to recognize within the Middle East, because of the refugee situations and displaced peoples, and I began obviously because of my current job to read more about it and to see more about it. And, working with the United Nations and your State Department here, we're constantly getting requests to participate in and support with refugees. And the kingdom has its initiatives and programs. And, it's a limited number. You look at it and you go, okay, if it's 9 million people, what's the pathway? It's solvable, even though it sounds like a big number. There's a resolution. And even if the resolution is taking a year or two, you can map against it and say, okay, here's what I'm going to do for these individuals where they are. Here's how I'm going to help them move forward, repatriate XYZ, and reconnect. COVID hit us all, and it became, rather than 9 million, it became the globe, the world, every single human being today is disconnected. And those who have are able to pick up, move on. You and I are communicating our work streams. Maybe it's a little inconvenient to no longer go to the office. Maybe it's a little uncomfortable to constantly be staring at a screen. But I would say that half of the world's population today is at a gross disadvantage. And for me, the definition of poverty is going to be digital poverty, those who have the connectivity and those that don't. And that brings me to a point that I've been thinking about is connectivity, digital integration. Is that a human right? Broadband, should it be universal? I think so. And if you're an entrepreneur listening to us, I really need you to think about this, not just from education. It starts there, but what can you do to hack the system? We're here. We're here. We can't go back. Half the world can't access a laptop. And even if they can, does it have the capacity to be uh, digitally engaged, I would say, through the screen? Can it support video? Can it support the audio? Can they download large files, which is their course and their curriculum? Is the electricity available 24 hours a day for them to be able to manage, distance learning? Are the tools and resources expensive? Can they afford them? Do they have credit cards? Do they have their bank attached to this? Do they have bank accounts? Right now, half of the world's population is shackled because they cannot participate. And this troubles me because we are going to move forward. We're talking about innovation. I mean, the kingdom's investing in AI. Amazing. We're investing in wires and technologies and robots and all of these fantastic things. We're investing in our youth. Our neighbors don't have that investment. Our neighbors don't have that capacity. Our neighbors, even if they try to map forward 2 years from now, some of them don't have the budgets to be able to deliver this. So what happens? We rise and they fall, and that creates profound inequity in our neighborhood. And how do we fix that? We have to have a collective investment. I would also say an example that just inspires me ridiculously is in Wyoming, they have the co-ops, the electric co-ops. They've hacked their system to say, we live across big expanses. We still need healthcare. We still want a sense of community. So what they did is in their co-ops, they created clusters and centers around themselves where they can engage and maintain their healthcare and have healthcare outposts and facilities. I think the future of digital technology needs to have a better blend of high and low tech, uh, because you can't assume everybody can engage at the highest level of high tech that we're all, not all, many of us would like to barrel towards. And I think humanity has to come back into the conversation of digital engagement. Distance is healthy for a little bit, but I'll tell you, the months I've been away from my family, yes, I'm in Washington, D.C. and can stare at them at the screen, it's worn away at my soul. Um, my work is still gone. And I think we need to remember humanity in advancement is critical. Disconnection is it's not healthy for any of us, for our mental health, for our emotional health, for our social well-being. And I don't think that it's healthy for how we would like to advance. So I think we have to reframe and revisit the dream of the future of the digital world and bring it back to be a bit kinder. Investments have to be made. The kingdom has funds. You have your resources. As young entrepreneurs, by the way, you need to know where to go to get your funding. You need to know where to get your resources. And I just want to make sure that everybody in the room knows that the Public Investment Fund created the Saudi Venture Capital Company. Bad exists for technology incubators. There's billions of dollars waiting for you. Come up with the idea. Don't wait for the ask. Go ahead. You know, Badir literally means go out and engage, be, advance the thought. Just do it. We need it. But don't
When it's
think of them
so,
as Riyadh. Think of
go ahead.
Bangladesh. Think of Sri Lanka. You know, think of Malawi. Don't think of Riyadh. Don't think of New York. Don't think of London.
So what is so interesting in what you're saying is, and I'm wondering what you're thinking is a little bit about kind of ideal roles, almost in a public-private partnership sense. And what I mean by that, I mean, you just talked about money available and things that have happened in Saudi. Frankly, from a financial inclusion perspective, one of the most interesting things that happened in Saudi during COVID was really compelling, regular people to start using some form of mobile money or some kind of digital solution so that people would not be infected by cash. India obviously has done this a little bit. Can
Right.
you talk a little bit about where you think the public side of this can be an activist without necessarily just being about money, but can open up a framework like the sandboxes you've created so that entrepreneurs and women and men on this call right now can then sort of take off with that kind of momentum that they're creating beyond money?
Right. So I think a lot of the obstacles that all the entrepreneurs in the room will face is the regulatory obstacles. Today, Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Investment, we're Arabs. We start big before we narrow down. And we're solving problems for big business. We're solving problems for the businesses we know. I'm not sure we're solving problems for the businesses we would like to have coming in because they haven't been invented yet. I think what government can do best is step back and deregulate when it comes to businesses. You've got to monitor and create regulation as the problems arise. But if you over sequester, you don't allow the space for innovation. Where innovation comes is in the space to dream. And so I want to make sure, and I always advocate when I meet with people, it's fun to say we want more SMEs. It's fun to say we're investing in entrepreneurs. But in the same way that many people haven't made space for women yet, have we actually made space for the entrepreneur? Have we made space for their business to come in? And have we made space for the local innovation versus the imported innovation? Because it's easier to go, oh, this exists in the US, I'm just going to bring it in. That's fine. But did that actually edge out the 3, 4 local companies that could have, engaged and developed a product that was a little bit more nuanced for its local environment? So I think where the public sector needs to be careful is not to, I mean, we've talked about this before, not not to over celebrate the foreign over the local, but create the environment that the local can be as good as the foreign and collaborate with it. We've got to allow our national platforms to thrive.
And most of the entrepreneurs that I meet have gotten quite good at getting into the sandboxes and other things and anything that can be done to create greater efficiency there and ease. And also just to ask opinion. I mean, I think there are entrepreneurs and investors on this call who have a lot of insight that could be very constructive to your colleagues in sort of thinking about not, for example, which I see America does often, which is kind of jam fintech into 100-year-old banking rules, but to actually think about fintech on its own terms, right?
Right. And join the debate. Don't be quiet. Write the op-ed. Send a letter to the Minister of Culture. Go to the events that he's at, not culture, sorry, commerce. Go to the events that he's at. Speak on the platforms, because until you highlight your personal obstacles, nobody's heard it. Nobody's thinking about it. You have to raise it. You can't assume they're going to get to you, because on their plates there's 5,000 things to do. And until a pressing need rises, they'll get there. But do you want to wait 2 years for the regulation to change, or do you want to highlight how positive the impact would be on your industry, your business, your vision, if the regulation was changed today? Nobody's
There's
perfect.
this there's this funny duality in something that you were talking about before about the digital divide, because at one level, I think we almost went like a pendulum where we thought technology will solve everything, and then all of a sudden there are so many people who are left out. But the reality is, if people want to go after, for example, ed tech or this very kind of passionate thing you described about our mental health, which lends itself to the privacy of telemedicine and all, there's this sort of line between, at one level, technology leaves people out, but at the same time, without technology, you can't bring them in. You know,
Correct.
just and so how should entrepreneurs think about that?
So I'm going to give you an example. Um, this whole situation happened virtually. My daughter called me on FaceTime and said she has a pain in her stomach. She's in London. I'm in Washington, D.C., nervous mother. We find through the insurance company that she has. Online, she researches. Here's the digital doctor. She calls the doctor, communicates with the doctor online, goes through her symptoms. They recognize, that she's perfectly fine, thank the Lord. In the real world, non-COVID, she would have called on the phone, made a doctor's appointment, waited, gone to see the doctor. Whatever her condition was could have gotten much worse by the time she saw the doctor, or she could have had to have a physical engagement. She was able to resolve the whole thing online in the span of 2 days, rather than 2 to 3 weeks. Fantastic. For my daughter, digital technology and connectivity was a resource that made her life and her quality of life better. As nervous mother, in 2 days, I knew she was perfectly fine. Switch to the person that does not have the bandwidth, doesn't have the computer, doesn't have the camera, doesn't have the technology, doesn't have the insurance, doesn't have the ability to engage with this doctor. What is that person doing for healthcare in an environment where they cannot leave their home to go and see this doctor? If they call the doctor's office, they say, connect with us digitally because we don't want people in our offices, because there's a curfew, because. One person is advantaged, one person is profoundly disadvantaged, and the health impact on that person, the impact on that person's family, that's dire. What if that person had internal bleeding? Never going to know. What if that person could have had a situation that could have been solved with immediate medical attention, physical attention? It's not fair. And that disparity is just going to keep growing. So it's not just education, it's healthcare, it's all of these things. So how do we balance this disparity? How do we make sure the dream that we had, that technology solves all, like you just said, solves all for everyone, not solves all for those that have the access and the ability? Economically, we're going to suffer if people aren't interconnected. Socially, environmentally, we're going to suffer. It's unhealthy. And I go back to humanity. We're human beings. Technology is the resource that allows for better quality of life. It is not the tool that overtakes our humanity. And I think COVID was a slap in the face to all of us because we forgot our humanity in the pathways that we were designing, which is why when COVID hit, half of us lost out.
I
So
mean, it sounds like
yeah, the
I'm
hack,
hearing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, the hack to the system, you are the best brains in this room. It's no longer about, I can't use my Apple TV, so I'm going to read a book. It's, for some people, life or death. For some people, it's their livelihood, it's their income, it's gone, you know.
What I'm hearing clearly is that if innovators can help solve the divide issue, this would be embraced beautifully, not only in Saudi, but across the region and beyond. This is
Ab-
something entrepreneurs could really lean into.
Absolutely, entrepreneurs can lean into this. Absolutely. Think of the young person that goes to school, um, lower income, and gets all their meals from school. They're no longer in the school. They're still maybe getting their education. They've missed out on a lot right there. Think of the family with a child with special needs that needs the physical engagement with their therapist. Some of them it's going to help through the screen. For many, it's not. So maybe the hack is, how do you create healthier environments where we are safer in times of crisis, where technology is the tool to support and facilitate, but you're creating safe environments. So I don't want you to think I'm asking you to figure better ways to get us to type things and watch things and just have the wires connect us. Think, widen the aperture and say, if this family cannot have access to that, how can they still have quality of life? What's the hack to that system? How could technology help them? What does that look like? And please, I beg you all, individuals with special needs, don't think of just the individual. Think of the caretaker, the mother, the brother, the sister. Think of the environment around them. And I just ask for people to widen the aperture of impact that they could possibly have when they're dreaming of their solutions.
One of the beautiful things about widening the aperture is that the issues that you're talking about are just shared by so many. So the best expertise around the world could lock arms. But I have to, this is my observation, you tell me if it's wrong, but it feels to me that there should be such amazing bridge building with not just Silicon Valley, but tech innovation throughout America and Saudi and the region overall. And it's just become unbelievably hard recently to build those bridges and have that connective tissue, not just in COVID, but in visas and other things. And do you have sort of any sense of what can be done better to get more innovators here and more innovators there? And not one person telling the other one what to do, but a real co-authorship of best ideas so that we can solve these big problems.
So visas and obstacles to travel are profoundly detrimental because the best magic happens when people engage with each other. And it's that moment of serendipity, not on the 30-minute call, not on the 40-minute call, but when you're seating with each other and you have the shared human experience, things trigger. That's where the fireworks and the magic happen. I think we need to deregulate. Deregulate. I'm not an advocate of big government. I am a government employee, but I think from my experience in the private sector, you've got to allow for better mobility. Today, there is the ability for rapid testing. Let's move forward on that. Let's create the safe spaces. Let's create the hubs of innovation, but not in the stereotypical way of I'm walking into a YouTube space and I'm innovating there. Innovation actually happens at the restaurant when the two of you are having a conversation and on the back of a paper napkin. You know, it happens while you're taking a walk. It happens in basic human engagement. And I think I know I'm repeating myself, but we need to go back to basic human engagement, which means we need to travel, which means we need to know each other, which means we need to stop having the fear of the other. The fear of the other, I get it. It comes from the big business where the microchip is made somewhere and their life is made on if someone, copies their microchip or someone copies their code. So you retreat a little bit and you pull back because you're in self-preservation mode. For the problem we need to solve today in the digital divide, we need to break ourselves of those shackles because we have to think of the other, not ourselves. And if you want to do that, you have to take the risk of sharing. You have to take the risk of open systems. And you have to take the risk of someone may actually do your idea much better than you could possibly do it because of their experience. And there's no shame in that. I understand, the innovators are going to say, but that's my check, that's my livelihood. We've got to find a better way to structure this and have the shared systems. We figured it out for fundraising. You have Indiegogo, you have crowdfunding, you have crowdsourcing. I think we need to move forward on that for shared ownership of intellectual property.
One of the beauties is I'd love to keep you for another 2 hours, but our time is almost over, and it's just been amazing 30 minutes with you. With a minute or so left, if STEP were to have you back 2 years from now, what are maybe two things, dream a little bit, that you hope that you'll be able to say that will be a reality then?
Wow. In 2 years, because of the speed of innovation and change, I hope that we'll be talking about something that I couldn't even possibly explain to you today, because it would be so new and so interesting and so dynamic that I'd like to say, because we've had peace in the Middle East, because we've been able to walk away from militant, aggressive behaviors, those young people who could have taken those pathways, look at the magnificent things that they have done. And aren't we phenomenally proud of them for taking that turn in their mindset and life and joining the rest of us to design the future for the next century? That would be my dream. I think it's achievable because I think everyone deserves a phenomenally open and good and welcoming opportunity. And I think the young kids who have taken that pathway were kids that didn't know that the people that are on this call with you exist. They didn't know that this was an opportunity for them. And they didn't know that there's actually someone out there that cares for them enough to welcome them in to the bright side, to the good side, that looks at using their mindset and their innovation for good and positive rather than destruction. And that's what I hope 2 years from now we'll be talking about.
The beauty of that dream is that you're talking to the very people who can be doers and co-authorship with people on the ground and really around the region and beyond. And so the greatest gift a human being can give is sharing time and insight to another human being. And you have done this in the most marvelous way in the last 30 minutes. So thanks very much for giving us the time.
Not at all, Chris. Thank you for having me. And thank you for the STEP group for thinking of me. And good luck to everyone in the call.
Now back to you all.